Hello, everyone. My name is Rod Kiles, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. Today, we're going to go through the year-end process, and we're going to focus on two modules. We're going to discuss contributions and attendance. I've been with the company a little bit over 16 years, and I really appreciate the opportunity to serve churches. You can reach me one of two ways if you need to contact me. You can reach me by phone at 314-268-1315, and you can also reach me by email at rod.kiles@cph.org. And we'll see if we can get that posted on the YouTube video later on. So I'm going to go ahead and switch screens over to our PowerPoint presentation. We have a new utility that we're using. In the past, we've used GoToMeeting, but we're using YouTube now. So there may be a little more switching through screens as I become familiar with the software. So I'm going to switch screens and pull the PowerPoint back up so that we can go through the overview. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch screens. And everybody should be able to see my overview screen at this point in time. So we're going to start out by going through an overview of the year end. Following that, we will discuss database rebuild, which has been renamed to Optimize and Rebuild Database, and we'll also go through the database backup process. After that, we'll start with contributions. And we will discuss batches, making sure that those batches are posted. We'll briefly discuss pledges and a few pledge rules for those churches that are going to be using pledges. We'll follow that up with envelopes and renumbering envelopes. Then we'll do statements. There's going to be a few internal reports that I'd like to show. Then we'll discuss the cleanup utility. Then after we get done with the cleanup utility, we'll switch and transition into attendance, which is going to be a shorter year-end process to discuss then. But we'll discuss batches. There's a couple of reports that I'd like to show, and we'll discuss the cleanup utility. Then following that, we'll have a short review. And for you that have attended some of my previous webinars, I like to have a short quiz at the end to kind of tie up any loose ends and maybe foster questions. So one thing that's a little different now that we're going to be using Hangouts in conjunction with YouTube is the fact that the questions, if you have them along the way, you're going to want to communicate those with us one of two ways. One would be one of three ways. The first would be through email. So you can send that in to support@cts.cph.org. You can also give us a call with any questions at our 1-800 number. So that number is 1-800-346-6120. And for you that use Twitter, you can send us a tweet at Concordia Tech. And those tweets will be answered by one of our support technicians. So the support technicians are standing by and they're ready to answer any questions you may have on the material that I'm going to cover. So I'm going to walk you through the process, but if you have questions, you can shoot us an email, give us a phone call, or you can send us a tweet. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get started. So I'm going to switch screens. And I'm going to pull up Shepherd Staff here. Okay. And everybody should be able to see my Shepherd Staff screen. Let me reposition one screen over to the other side so that we don't get that mirroring effect and I can still see what's going on the screen. So everybody who has Shepherd Staff or every customer of Shepherd Staff is going to have Shepherd Staff, and it's going to be installed on your PCs. And you'll notice that my login screen is a little bit different than your login screen. There's this extra your CTS account is not registered box. Now, we are in the process of duplicating the Shepherd Staff 8.4 software, which is always a question around this time of year. You know, outside of year end, they also talk about, hey, when am I going to receive the upgrades that are due to our that are due to be sent out for customers. So we're going to be sending those out mid-December toward the end of December. So the softwares at the duplicators are going to be pressing disk and mailing those out. So people can expect to start receiving them mid to late December. Every time you log into the software, each person should have their own username and password. And I'm going to go ahead and log in as the administrator. Now, your username and password becomes even more critical at this time of year because it determines what you can and cannot do within the software. So if you don't have the rights to access the year-end utilities that we're going to be discussing, then you won't be able to complete these tasks. So make sure that when you log in with the correct rights. So you will notice down at the bottom, I'm on version 8.4. Most of you guys are on 8.3 with the feature pack. So it will be on its way pretty soon. And you can check for updates when you log into the software. Now, the updates is not going to be the disk that you receive in the mail. It's going to be incremental updates that are small enhancements and bug fixes that the programmers release. So, okay, so I'm going to click OK to go ahead and log in. And once I'm logged in, I'm going to land here on the main Shepherd staff screen, and I'll be able to tell what version I'm on at the lower part of the window. Then across the top is going to be membership, attendance, contributions, finance, scheduler, and utilities. Now, when doing the year end, there is an order to the process. So we're going to complete our year end in this order. So it goes contributions, attendance, membership, then you can do finance and scheduler at any time. And during this webinar, we're going to discuss the contributions and attendance. So you probably want to make a note, the order of closing out the year inside of Shepherd Staff is contribution, attendance, membership, then finance and scheduler optional at any time. And when you're doing the year end, you have the right to only close out the modules that your church actually uses. So if you only use membership and attendance, then, and you don't use contributions and finance, you don't have to close out contributions and finance or close out scheduler. Just close out the modules that you use. So, and one other thing to note before we actually go to our next step is we've removed the actual year-end utility inside a lot of the modules. So the only module that actually has a utility titled year-end is the finance module. The way we were able to do that was by adding dates to just about every single report. So whenever you enter information into the system, it's date and time stamped, and the majority of the reports are date and time stamped. So you can run your reports at any time, even into the past and into the future, without causing any kind of conflict. So the only module that needs the year-end utility run and the year advanced is going to be the finance module. So let's go ahead, and the first thing to think about when we're doing the year end is running a database rebuild and doing a data backup. And it's critically important that we back up before we go through our year-end process. The reason being is if something goes awry, if we delete something that we want, the only way to get that information back is through our data backup. And all data backups are going to be kept on site at your church. If for some reason there's some type of failure, you'll just simply restore that backup. If some reason data's wiped out that you didn't mean to wipe out, you can restore that backup. If a hard drive fails, all of those things, you can restore a backup. So there's one utility that we suggest running that any church can run, and that's the, we call it database rebuild lots of times, but it's to optimize and rebuild your database. And to access this utility, I'm going to start the utility running prior to discussing it, because it literally takes about 60 to 70 seconds for it to run on the database that I'm using. So to run the utility, you'll go to utilities and you go to rebuild optimize database. I'm going to click there and start the utility running. Say yes. And what the database rebuild, the optimize and rebuild database utility does is it goes through and checks your database for problems, but it also compacts your database. So it's twofold in process. So by checking it for problems, it's going to make sure that everything's okay with the database. If it runs into some type of error, you can give us a call at our 1-800-346-6120 number, and you can let us know what the error number is, and we can help you resolve it. And if you don't have any problems, hey, we're ready to go on and back the data up. And from there, the next part is it compacts the data. It makes everything more efficient. So at that point, by running this utility, you can actually speed up performance. Now, when you run this utility, you are going to want to have everybody else out of the software. You just want this one machine to run the database rebuild. And you're going to want to run it from the server machine if your system has a server or a main computer. Doing so will take the network out of the process. So if there's something going on with the network, it won't corrupt the database during that process. But that's what's going on with the database rebuild. Now, every once in a while, we'll get a question about, will the database rebuild delete any information? And when it comes to the database rebuild, it's not going to cause you to lose any data. It's one of those utilities that you would say can only help you. It won't harm you. So once it's complete, you'll receive a message just like this: the database rebuild and optimization has been completed. We were successful. Then we'll click OK. So now that we've checked our database for problems and we've optimized it so it performs a little bit faster, then we'll go to Utilities here at the top of the screen, and let's back up. So I'm going to click on Utilities and Backup, and I'm going to want to back my data up. Now, when you do a data backup, you're going to want to back up to at least 2 different sources, 2 different destinations. And the reason being, if one of the backups is bad, you can use the other backup. You're also going to want to store those backups in different locations. So when it comes to those locations, if you had both backups on your local machine and the computer hard drive failed, then you're in a situation where you lost the backups and the hard drive and the data all at the same time. What you'll want to do is keep one backup probably on site and then one backup off site. And when it comes to backing up, you can back up to any local drive here on your machine. And that could be a network drive. It could be a flash drive, could be a hard drive. But you want to have them in different locations just in case you have a worst case scenario. A hard drive failing is one thing. There's churches that have been destroyed by natural disasters, by fires. We can always send you new CDs with the software, but we don't store the data here. The data is property of the church. So in that case, if you had that second backup, or you had a backup in a fireproof safe or off-site, we'll send you the software. Insurance will pay for the new computer. We'll send you the software. You'll install the software, restore the backup, and everything will be good to go. So you'll be back up and running, at least when it comes to your church data. So I'm going to go ahead and back up, and I'm going to select a local drive here in our network. So I'm going to click on the P drive, and where it says comments, I can type in comments. So I can say this is going to be my year-end backup. And I can put my initials if I'd like. So then there is a box for checkout finance, and that checkout finance box, what it does is it's used when someone's going to be taking finance home to work on the system, to work on finance from home, entering in checks, entering in deposits. In our scenario, we're not going to want to check out finance. If you check out finance, it is going to put a flag into the finance module and warn people that someone's taken finance home, and that anything that they do inside the software will be wiped out when the person brings finance back. So you want to be real careful with that. And anytime you take finance home, you want to restore finance only. You don't want to do a full restore. So I'm going to leave that unchecked. There is a warning down here when backing up to CD. For any church that's still backing up to CD, the CDs do not come pre-formatted. You will need to format that with your CD burning software. Then you'll be able to back up to that CD. So I'm going to click on Start. And it's going to warn me at this point, backup only backs up your current database. If you wish to back up additional databases, you select a church to switch to those databases, and then you'll back up each one separately. And in that situation, like I'm suggesting 2 flash drives or 2 separate destinations, you'll want to, if you have 2 databases, you'll want to move up to 4 flash drives, or you could use some combination of destinations at that point in time, but you want to be real careful at that point in time. And then also, statement number 2, backup will not back up any attachments or photos. You must use another method such as tape backup, a flash drive, or a recordable CD, DVD. So when dealing with that, those are stored outside of the database, inside of your database folder. So they're not directly inside of your Shepherd Staff database, but they're in the database folder in folders named SS Attachments and SS Photos, and you'll want to back those up separately. So I'm going to click OK. Then if I've backed up in this location before, I'm going to receive a warning message. A backup already exists in P. Do you want to archive this backup? And I would urge everybody to say yes. This will give you multiple points to go back to and to restore your backups. So if you answer no, it's just simply going to overwrite your backup and you won't be able to go back step by step in time. So I'm going to answer yes, and that's going to start my backup. Now, sometimes there's a question about, can I back up to the cloud? Now, Shepherd Staff does not natively back up to the cloud, but if you put the backup location that you have in the path of your cloud backup, then it will back up those backup files to the cloud. So not natively, but it is possible by using a third-party software. So our backup was successful. Backup to P drive, backup to drive P was successful. So we'll click OK. And now that we've run our database rebuild and we have backed up, we are ready to go through some of the year-end tasks inside the contributions module. Now, I didn't state this early on, but the webinar is slotted, or I may not have stated this, the webinar is slotted for an hour long. So we're going to adhere to that time as close as we can. Now, to go through the first year-end process with contributions, I'm going to open up the contributions module. So I'm going to click on contributions here at the top inside of our main menu. And once I'm inside of this module, I'm going to see my normal desktop items, which I can enable or disable if I'd like. So I'm going to close the I want to, and I'm going to close the to-do list. Now in the background, or which would be the foreground now, we are going to see our church dashboard. And you'll notice that there's little exclamation points on a couple of the tabs. Now with those exclamation points, this is going to let us know that there's batches that are unposted. And step 1 when dealing with your year end and dealing with contribution and attendance is to make sure that those batches are posted. We're going to want to make sure that all of our information is up to date because we're going to be printing these year end reports, and having unposted batches means we're probably going to be short on our contribution statements and on our contribution reports. So seeing those exclamation points lets us know instantly that we have something that we need to take a look at. So I'm going to close the church dashboard and I'm going to go up to our batch window. To access batches, I usually click on the B here at the top inside of our toolbar. You can also click on the word batches and go to offering batches. So either one of those actions will open up our offering batch window. And once we're in our offering batches, we'll see that we have an unposted batch and we're going to want to post that batch. Now you'll notice that the batch number is number 1. And when it comes to creating batches, every time you create a new batch, it does increment the batch number. Now that number will continue to increment batch after batch until you run a database rebuild with no batches in the window. So the way that you can reset the batch number is post all your batches and then run database rebuild. That will clear out any batch that will reset your batch number. It doesn't clear out batches, it resets your batch number. So that's one thing you may want to make a note of. There are churches that like to start out with batch number 1 at the first of the year, and that's the way that they do it. So to post this batch, I'm going to click on the batch and click the post button down here at the lower right, and you'll notice that it says print reports during posting. So that means I'm just going to get a posting report. So I'm going to click post, and I'll have the choice to create a deposit in finance, which is very popular. And if I have it enabled, I can say create an attendance batch, and I can attach that to an event. So we're going to go ahead and post this batch. I'm going to click OK. And batch 1 posting reports are available for printing. Make sure the printer is ready. It's on. We will, and then we'll click OK, and it'll go through and print those reports, and they'll be accessible. I can go to my printer and grab those. So now, once all of our batches are posted, we're ready to print reports, actually, but there's 2 things I'd like to take a look at before we actually start printing reports so that we can run all our reports in a row. So now that we've done batches, it's also important for those churches that use pledges to add new pledges for the upcoming year. And when it comes to those pledges, I want to go through 4 pledge rules. So I'm going to switch screens one more time, and I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint where I have 4 little slides there. Okay. There we go. Okay, so everybody should be able to see my slideshow. There we go. And the first pledge rule is new pledges should be entered each year. When it comes to pledges, those are tied to the offering records. And when dealing with those pledges, if you rename or modify the current pledge, it doesn't detach the offerings from that pledge. So we'll want to make sure to create new pledges every single year. Pledge rule number 2, and there's going to be 4 in this series here. Pledges can be entered at any time regardless of date. So if you receive the pledge cards in October for the upcoming year, you can go ahead and enter those pledges into the system regardless of date. And if you receive them later on, after the first of the year, you can enter them into the system then. So there's nothing stopping you from entering that information into the system. Since everything is date and time stamped, you can enter that information in, even if you haven't completed your year end. Pledge rule number 3, pledges entered after the offerings are entered must be recalculated to attach those offerings to the pledge. So if you enter the pledge after you've entered some of your offerings, say you get through January and somebody turns in a pledge card, you'll simply put that pledge in the system and use the recalculate option to recalculate those pledges. And rule 4 is offering records entered after the pledge is entered must be credited toward the active pledge. So will be credited toward the active pledge. So and it is a non-negotiable. It does automatically attach them to the active pledge. It can be changed later on down the line. You can go in and edit that offering and attach it to a different pledge. But by default, they are automatically attached to the active pledge. So if I enter an offering in as of January 1st for the general fund, it'll be automatically attached to that person's pledge for the general fund. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I am going to switch back to my other screen. There we go. And everybody should be able to see contributions now. And with contributions, let's go ahead and add in a couple of pledges. So to add pledges in, we would go to the P here at the top, and that will bring up my pledge records grid. And when the pledge record grid comes up, you'll notice at the upper left, pledge records active only, pledge records, comma, active only. So click find to show more pledges. So you can click the find button and then click show all, and that would actually show all your pledges. And we do have some pledges in 2017 already. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add an additional pledge for Dave and Sue Abbott. So we have one for the general fund, but I'm going to add in another one. And there's 2 techniques that I'm going to show today. So if I click on the add button, that is going to bring up add pledge. I can then select the contributor, select the fund, and I'm going to say mission fund. Then I can select the amount and say that they're going to contribute $25 a week starting, and then there is a date cycler on the left that cycles through preset dates, and I can use that to select dates if I'd like. So I can click there and it'll fill in both of these fields for me. Then it'll automatically calculate the total. If this is the only pledge that I'm entering in, I'll click OK. And if I have another one, I'll click Add Again. Clicking Add Again will retain the majority of the information and just allow me to select the second contributor. So let me say this one's for Sally Baxter. Click OK. Then that will close out the window. So that's how you can add the pledges for the upcoming year. Now, when it comes to adding, that's basically doing one manually. Now, if the person is going to have a very similar pledge in the upcoming year, what you can do is you can click on a pledge from a prior year and then use the copy button. So if I click on copy, that will pull forward the person's name and all of that pledge information. Then at that point, I can change the dates or change anything that I'd like to do. So I know this person has a pledge to the general fund, so I'm going to switch this one to mission and then use the date cycler. Then I can click OK, and then that will put that pledge into the system. So those are two quick ways of adding in your pledges for the upcoming year and not causing yourself to be in a situation where you use the old pledge and it still has all the old offerings on there, and now this person has a pledge where they pledged $3,000 and there's $4,500 attached to it. So that's how you'll add pledges. Okay, so once we've entered our pledges into the system, next, let's look at renumbering envelopes. I'm going to close the pledge records window. And to access our envelopes, usually what I do is I click records and go to contributors. Now, there's a couple other ways of accessing your contributor records which equate to your envelopes. And what a second one is if you go to contributor and go to records. And a third one is if you click on the C with the two little people side by side there. All three of those techniques will bring up your contributor records window. Now I'm going to scroll to the top of the window here. And inside our contributor records window is going to be a list of all of our contributors. And it is required that you have an envelope number in the system in order for you to record offerings for that person. So if you get a new visitor, for you to actually record offerings for them, you'll give them an envelope number. Now, one slight workaround that some people use is they'll put it in loose offerings and then use special description and fill the person's name into special description. That allows you to record the offering. It doesn't allow you to print a contribution statement for that individual or that couple. So if you use that technique, just please be careful. But for recording, tracking, reports, and everything like that, then you will want to give them an envelope number. So we had a couple join our church recently, Jack and Nancy Wilson. And with Jack and Nancy Wilson, we put them into the system, but we haven't assigned them an envelope number yet. So in renumbering envelopes, there's 3 different ways of renumbering envelopes, and I consider renumbering envelopes to be a 5-step process. So the 3 different types of renumbering is going to be, one, everybody keeps the same number coming up into the next year, which is quite popular. The second is renumbering alphabetically. So if your numbers are kind of jumbled, you can renumber alphabetically. And the third is a custom renumbering system, which means that you may have a split in your numbering system where you have regular envelopes and Sunday school envelopes or some other type of split within your system. And I've seen people who use, who have like an electronic giving system and then they have a special numbering system for that. So let's go ahead and let's go through the renumbering process. Now, I was saying there's a 5-step process, and we'll go through those 5 steps, and we'll also show you each one of the different types. So we'll show you, you know, everybody keeps their number. We'll show alphabetical, and we'll also show the custom renumbering. So step 1 for renumbering is backing up. So you always want to back up before you renumber. If somehow a mistake is made, the only way to fix that mistake is either restore backup or manually fix it. And if you can restore backup and just do it again, that may be quicker. The second is add envelope numbers for those who did not have an envelope number last year or in the current year, and they're going to need one. So we need to add in those envelope numbers. So I'm going to click the add button down here at the bottom and add an envelope for Jack and Nancy Wilson. So I'm going to go down to contributor, and I'm going to select the first contributor, and that's going to be Jack Wilson. There's a couple more down. And when dealing with envelopes, there is more than one, or there's two types of envelopes. There's single envelopes and joint envelopes, shared envelopes. And if Jack's married and he is contributing jointly with his wife, then you would say share this envelope, and then you would select his lovely wife, Nancy. Then that's how you'll share the envelope. Now, in most cases, couples contribute jointly, but there are situations where they don't. If they do not contribute jointly, simply don't share the envelope. Now, when it comes to the envelope number, if they didn't have an envelope in 2016, but they're going to have an envelope in 2017, you can just say use next highest number. And then that'll just give them the next highest number in the numbering sequence. Then when we go through this renumbering process, we will give them the correct number through that process. So you can also type a number in this box. So if you go into the closet and there's a box of envelopes that they're supposed to receive, say it's 201, you could type in the number, give them the box, and then add that here into the system. So both of those techniques work just fine. So at this point, we would click OK on our window, and then that would add them into our system. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Then there's going to be Jack and Nancy Wilson with the envelope number that we just assigned. Let me double click on their name just a second. Okay, now on the lower part of the window, you'll notice that there's an option for stating what type of contribution statements they want. It could be that they just want a paper statement. It could be that you want to email them statements, and they could say they don't want to receive a statement. So the system does have the ability to email out contribution statements. When it comes to that, you do have to have a 32-bit version of Microsoft Outlook on your computer, and the emails are handed off from Shepherd staff over to Microsoft Outlook. So it does have to be a 32-bit version of Microsoft Outlook because Shepherd staff is a 32-bit program. So the handshaking works correctly. So with ours, we're just going to do paper statements in our examples today. Then below that, it's going to say name to use on contribution statements. If you want to use a custom name, you can click custom name and type in that name. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So that's how you'll add in an envelope number for somebody. The third step, so first step's to back up. Second step is to add any envelope numbers to people who didn't have one, who are going to need one in the next year. The third step is removing envelopes or correcting envelopes for the upcoming year. So we have two scenarios, and you'll notice that there's contributor 1 removed and contributor 2 removed. And we have one person who transferred out to another congregation. That's going to be Howard Brown. And then we, unfortunately, Mr. Art Dean passed away, and we're going to update his envelope as well. So with Howard Brown, since he's left the congregation and he's not going to need an envelope number next year, we're going to mark him as skipped. And what this does is it allows the system to be able to say, hey, don't include him in the normal numbering sequence when we renumber our envelopes. So on Howard Brown, I can click on Howard here. And to mark him as skipped, there's two techniques. I can click on his record and click on edit. And then I could say skip this envelope when renumbering and click OK. Looks like he's already skipped. So then I can click OK and he'll be marked as skipped. Now, the second technique is to unlock the grid. So you'll notice in some of our grids that there's an unlock button down here at the bottom right. And that unlock button allows us to enter data directly into our grid. So this is a contributor grid. So I'll click unlock, and you'll notice some color changes here, but I have to take that back. I can't. There's something else going on. I should be able to. Any of the white columns, I should be able to click on the check boxes and mark those people as skipped. And I should also be able to type an envelope number here over on the in the envelope next year's column. I'm going to, sorry about that, everyone. I'm not sure why that's not working. Well, let's go with the first scenario there. That actually throws a little bit of a wrench into my one of my scenarios coming up here shortly. So to mark somebody as skipped, you should be able to check the box here by unlocking the grid. You can also edit the record and mark them as skipped at that point in time. When the grid says that it's locked, it's actually unlocked. This isn't the status of the grid, it's the action to be taken. So once you make changes, you would then lock the grid back, and then that person would be marked as skipped. Next, let's go to Art and Virginia. And similar situation. In some aspects, we're going to be updating the record. So I can click on the record and click on edit. Since Art Dean passed away, let's say that he passed away last year and we're getting around to updating his envelope number this year. What we would do is we would unshare the envelope number, and then we would select Virginia Dean here from the drop list. So I'm going to type in Dean and select Virginia. Then at this point, I'll click OK. This is going to give me two windows. It's going to let me know that the first contributor on this envelope has changed. This will assign all offerings and pledges from the old contributor to the new contributor. So when we make changes like this, whoever's remaining on the envelope is going to receive all of the offering records. So we're going to say yes. And then it's going to let me know that the second contributor has changed and whether or not I want to update that as well. So then I'll say yes. So now all of the offerings will be attached to Virginia Dean, and we'll no longer have that red banner here on either contributor 1 or contributor 2. And basically that little red bar is to let you know that, hey, this person's removed. You may need to pay attention and make some updates to this person's record. Okay, so let's go ahead and now that we've completed step 3, we've gone through and skipped anybody who's not supposed to receive an envelope next year. We did that with Howard Brown here. Step 4 is to run the renumber next year's envelope tool. And so let me close this. And let's go to utilities here at the top. And underneath utility, there's going to be a series of tools, and we're going to go through a few of these today. So for renumber next year's envelopes, that's the tool that we're going to want to use in step 4. And a little bit of foreshadowing, we're going to start using next year's envelopes in step 5. So to renumber the envelopes, we'll click on renumber next year's envelope numbers, and it's going to give us a couple of choices. So it's going to say use the current year's envelope number for next year's envelope number, and then there's also going to be assign next year's envelope numbers alphabetically. So since everybody's keeping the same number and we're just going to move people who are outside of the numbering system to the very end, scenario 1, we'll click OK. Are you sure you want to renumber next year's envelope numbers? And we'll answer yes. Then next year's envelope numbers were assigned successfully. Then we'll click OK. So now that the next year's envelope numbers have been assigned, we'll go back to our contributor records. So I'm going to click on the little C with the 2 people here. And you'll notice we have 2 columns. One is our current year, so envelope current year, and the other is envelope next year. So every person technically has 2 envelope numbers at the same time every single year. One is for current year, one is for next year. And the majority of the year, those envelope numbers will match. When you go through the renumbering process, that is going to allow you to change next year's envelope numbers. And once that's changed, you'll review it, and then you'll go to step 5. And step 5 is going to be assigning next year's envelope number. And the way that that works is you will actually take the number from the next year's column and put it into the current year's column. And we have a utility that does that for you. So I'm going to go ahead and close this window, and we're just going to make note of Howard Brown. He's going to be the example that's going to let us know that this task has been completed successfully. Okay, so now let's go to utilities again, and we're going to run the start using next year's envelope numbers utility. And with this utility, it makes your envelope numbers active. It makes them ready to be used. Now, you want the timing of people running this utility is important. So if you're not making any changes to your envelope numbers, you're just eliminating envelope numbers, then you can pretty much run this at any time because those people are no longer here. You're just updating. Now, if you're actually changing envelope numbers and you're assigning alphabetically, which is our next scenario, then you want to wait until you've posted all of the offerings for your current year, 2016, or last year, which would be 2016, print all your reports, and then run this utility. And the reason being, once you assign the new envelope numbers, all of your reports are going to show those new envelope numbers. So you can run this utility before 12/31/2016, but you just want to actively be aware of your offering records and your envelope numbers and the way that you want your reporting to show, like which number you want to show on your reporting. So I'm going to go ahead and answer yes. And next year's envelope numbers are now activated. So we'll click OK. And once I click OK, then I can go back to the C here for my contributor records. And we'll notice now Howard Brown has envelope number 10,209 for both current year and next year. So whenever we run our reports, we'll just exclude those high numbers, and it'll take him out of the numbering system. And we can also sort by envelope as well. So I can click on envelopes current and click sort, and then it will sort by that envelope number. We'll see that Howard Brown, let me scroll all the way to the bottom here, is now at the very bottom. Okay, so that's how you basically renumber and exclude people who are no longer supposed to be receiving envelopes in the upcoming year. The second scenario is if you are going to renumber alphabetically. So say that we've made a change in our numbering scheme, and instead of starting at 101, we're going to start at number 1. So to do that, we'd go through the same initial first 3 steps. We'd back up just in case. We would add anybody who needs an envelope number next year that doesn't have one. Number 3, we would go and skip anybody who's not supposed to receive one next year. Including skipped, I also want you to update any envelope numbers as well. So if we have somebody like Virginia Dean, whose husband passed away, and she wants that envelope number updated, we'll update those as well. So then, once we're done with step 3, we'll close contributor records. We'll then go to utilities, and we'll go to renumber next year's envelope numbers. Then, instead of use the current year envelope number for the next year's envelope number, we're going to use our second option. And we're going to say assign the next year envelope numbers alphabetically. And we're going to start with 1, so we'll be able to see a drastic change there. And there is a note down here. I kind of skipped over it last time. It says setting envelope numbers for next year does not change the current numbers. To activate the next year's envelope numbers, run the start using next year envelope number utility. Okay, so then I'll click OK. It's going to give me a warning. Are you sure you want to renumber next year's envelope numbers? We'll say yes. And next year's envelope numbers were assigned successfully. So we'll click OK there. Then we can go back to our envelope numbers. We can go to our contributor records. And at this point, what we would do is we would take a look and we can see that the next year's envelope numbers were assigned alphabetically. Now, I'm going to sort my grid alphabetically so that these numbers will show sequentially and alphabetically. Okay, so I'm going to click on sort. And now we'll be able to see alphabetically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Howard Brown is skipped. So then 9 will go to Rob Calloway. And the numbers will all be sequentially and alphabetically. And we just want to make sure that, let me pull that back up. We just want to make sure that we have those people skipped before we renumber, and we want to make sure to activate those numbers at the appropriate time. So before we activate the numbers, we're going to want to print out our contribution reports and do those types of things. So the third numbering, or the third renumbering technique, and let me close this. And actually, I'm going to say, I'm going to not activate those right now so I can show you the envelopes report here in just a few minutes for printing out envelope box labels and getting a new list of envelopes. Some people will keep a list of envelopes on the desk where they enter the offerings in. So I'm going to show you how to print that report. The third scenario, let me bring contributor records back up, is doing a manual renumbering. It's kind of like a custom or manual renumbering. And when you're doing that manually renumbering, you're going to follow the same first 3 steps. So you're going to start out by backing up. You're going to add in any envelope numbers for those people who didn't have one in 2016, and you are going to skip anybody or update anybody's records that needs to be updated. When we get to step 4, we are going to go to utilities and go to start using next year utilities and go to renumber next year's envelopes. Then at that point, if there's a certain number that we want to start with, we can start with that number. If you're doing a custom numbering sequence, you're probably going to want to use a high number to move all the envelope numbers out of the way, so that when you go to type these numbers into the grid, you can simply type those in order. So usually what I do is I figure out whatever my highest number is, I'll add the number of envelopes to that I'm going to have, then that will make sure that I have plenty of space. So I'm going to say 500 and click OK. Are you sure? Yes, I am sure. Then I can click OK. And at that point, I'll go back to contributor records. Now, once I'm in our contributor records, you'll notice that next year's envelope number starts at 500. And if I'm going to do a custom numbering system, I would unlock my grid and I would go into the next year's column and I would type in the number that I wanted. Now, as you're aware of earlier, for some reason, I can't type in the grid right now. But I would go down the list and type in the numbers that I want. Then if I want to skip a section, I could skip, and then I can type in the Sunday school kids down here at the bottom. So by moving all the numbers forward high into the numbering sequence, it allows me just to simply type the numbers into the grid. And if I don't move the numbers up, to a certain point, anytime I run into a number that is already taken, I have to stop, take that number away from somebody else, and then I can assign that number to this person. So when renumbering and doing that custom numbering sequence, I'd say do yourself a favor and just move those numbers really high, then just type the numbers into the system. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go back to utilities and go to renumber next year's envelope number. And I'm basically going to start at 1 so that the reports that I'm getting ready to show here in just a couple seconds are going to show correctly. So I'm going to click OK, answer yes, and click OK. Then from there, go back to our contributor records, and we're looking appropriate now. So let me mention one other thing, and then we will transition into reports for contributions. So with over here on the right-hand side, you'll see something that's called EOI number. And the EOI number stands for Electronic Offering Import. And with Shepherd Staff, those churches that utilize Vanco services, which is a form of online and electronic giving, you can pull those offerings directly into Shepherd Staff by using the Vanco import utility or the EOI number, EOI utility for importing offerings. Now, with the Vanco services system, their numbers aren't directly tied into our system. So you have to specify which number you're using inside of Vanco. So with that said, usually I suggest keeping the numbers consistent all the way across, consistent in our program with the box of envelopes that the person has, and use that exact same number inside of Vanco. So you'll notice how the EOI number is 1 and the envelope number is 101. When you renumber envelopes, I would also renumber your EOI numbers just to keep them consistent. Now, that's going to be a personal preference. Consistency usually works out best, so I would go ahead and make those consistent. So I would change it here, and I would go into Vanco and I'd change that number. So for Dave and Sue Abbott, I would edit their record and type in their new EOI number, cancel. Sorry about that. Usually you would unlock the grid, and since I can't type the number into the grid, I was thinking you could go into the record and type it in there. I will make sure to notify the programming team about not being able to type in here, and I don't know if that's just the utility that we're using for the webinar, but we'll make sure that that's working. So you would type in your EOI number. I'd make it 1 so it matches here. I'd also go into Vanco services and type it in there. And then I would lock my grid back. Then all those numbers would be consistent across the board. Okay, so next, let's take a look at a few of the reports that we're going to want to run for the year end. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go to reports. And the first report I'm going to show is the contributor list envelope box labels report. So I'm going to double click on that report, and it's going to bring up the report where I can print out either my envelope labels, or I can print out an envelopes list. So if I do the one column report, I can select how I want the report to sort. I can say exclude envelopes to be skipped, so Howard Brown and those other bogus envelope numbers don't appear. Then I can preview the report, and the report will show me the current year number, and it'll show me the next year's number. And then when I actually run that start using next year's numbers tool, it'll move the numbers over into the correct column, over into the current column. And I can also print out my envelope box labels. So if I wanted 3 wide, I can say which number I want on there. So if I'm doing this for next year, I can say next year's envelope number. I can exclude those to be skipped. I can say in a date range. I can include the address, include additional text. Please do not use until January 1st. And I can use a custom name, then preview. And when it previews, it'll look just like this. And then you'll be able to print those out on label stock paper and affix those to your envelope boxes. Okay, let me close this report here and close the contributor list report. And the next report that I want to show is going to be the contribution statements. So I'm going to go to statements and mailing labels previewable, double click on that. And once I'm inside of this window, I will select all contributors, enter in my date range, select the type of report that I want. Now, I'll usually be doing statements, but we also have gift in kind acknowledgments for gifts that are non-cash. And we have the ability to print out mailing labels. So if you print statements, you may need labels to go with those statements to mail those out. I can include those who did not give. I can say alternate addresses if in effect. Then below that, I can say how I want to sort. I can include a message. So if I want an IRS tax message, I can go to message here at the lower left. I can click add, and I can add in, I'll call this IRS tax message. Then I can type in the tax message. No goods or services were received. And you'll want to get the exact wording for your statement. So then I'll click OK. And I'll click the message and click select, and that message will appear on my statements. Down at the bottom, there's itemize, organize, itemize offerings, include special description, group by fund, and group by pledge within fund. Then I would preview the report. And at that point, I would then be able to see the offerings grouped together by fund, and if there was pledge information, I'd be able to see that pledge information. Once I reviewed all of my statements, which I can do by using the directional arrows up here, I could then print those statements out and distribute those accordingly. So let me close that. The next report that I want to show is the fund statement analysis report. And the fund statement analysis report, double click on that. This report allows you to do something that I hear quite a few people ask about, and that's print out statements for a single fund. So if you have a pledge fund, and I'm going to select the general fund, you can generate statements that only include offerings for that fund, and it'll include the pledge information. So you can say what type of pledge terminology you want to use. Then you can click preview, and that will actually give you statements that just show the offerings for that one specific fund. So I'm going to close that report. For internal reports, you may want to use the exact same fund statement analysis report. You can do an overview, and you can select a specific fund. Then when you preview the report, it gives you an annual report for that fund. So you'll be able to see numbers that tell you about pledging, about offerings. It'll give you graphs down at the bottom. It's a pretty good report. Let me close that. There's also the contributions by week report. Let me double click on that. And the contributions by week report will allow you to select the funds that you want to report on, and you can use up to 5 different funds. Then when you click OK and click preview, it will allow you to see how much was given week by week to each one of those funds. And a lot of churches will print off these reports and store these paper copies for the whole year. So it's not a very long report. There's usually 52 or 53 weeks in a year, but you may have to print off several because you can only have up to 5 funds on it. So let me close that. And after that, let's take a look at the fund summary report, which is somewhat similar to the contribution by week. With the fund summaries report, you can do a fund summary. You can set the time frame. Include detail is going to include the offerings. If you've printed out contribution statements, you probably don't want to print out every single offering, but you can include pie charts on the last page, and you can do a preview, and this will tell you how much was given to each fund. It'll give you the total number of offerings and the average for each fund, and that'll be for the whole year. Then when you go to the last page, you'll be able to see a graph that allows you to see how much was given to each fund. One of them is going to be really large. The other ones are going to look like slivers. But you can see dollar amounts, and you can see percentages here on the right-hand side. Well, let me close that. And let's take a look at one other report, and that report is going to be the contributions by contributor fund household report. So if I double click on that report will allow me to see every single contributor, single or joint, and I do have the option to group them by household, and it'll show me the amounts that they gave during the year. So I'm going to change this date to 12/31/2016. And then if I can group by, I can show by envelope, and I can also show by household. So by envelope, I can say include a pledge summary if our church does pledges, and include next year's envelope number if I want to include that. Then I can click preview, and this will show me each contributor, how much they pledged, how much they gave, if they're ahead, behind, and it'll show me a breakdown by each one of the funds. So this would be an internal report that would give you a list of everybody's offerings, everybody's summary totals by fund. So let me close that. And that's probably the last report that I would show there. So once I had generated all my reports and I'm ready for next year, I would go up to utilities and I would say start using next year's envelope numbers and answer yes. So next year's envelope numbers are now activated. If I click OK and go to my contributor records, then at that point in time, we'll be able to see all of the envelope numbers have been assigned over. So I'm running a little bit long on the material right now, so we probably have about another 10 to 15 minutes. So let me apologize for running long there. Let's close contributor records here, and I'm going to go to utilities, and let's talk about the cleanup utility. So the cleanup utility allows you to purge information from the system. And when it comes to purging information, we do suggest holding on to the data as long as you can. And we suggest, hey, not purging information if you can convince everybody to do so. So I'm going to click the cleanup utility. And it says it is highly recommended that you make a backup of your contribution data before running any cleanup utility. So please back up. If you're going to purge data, having a backup will be the only way that you can get that information back and to view and report that information. Running these cleanup utilities will sever the data and eliminate information from the system. So we're going to click yes. And the only option left in the cleanup utility is deleting pledges and deleting offerings. We used to have some for deleting summary records and stuff like that, but now when you delete pledges and offerings, it also deletes summary records. So you want to be real cautious with this. It does limit you to the last 10 years, so you have to hold on at least 10 years worth of data. But in doing so, if you decided to purge, you'd click OK and you'd just be down to 10 years worth of data at that point. But 10 years does give you a good trend. Holding on to more data is even better as far as I'm concerned there. So we would advise holding on to as much data as possible. So that's the cleanup utility. And let me, I'm going to click cancel here. I don't want to purge any data. Okay, so let's transition over to the attendance module. And the attendance module is by far a lot simpler than what the attendance module is by far a lot simpler than the contributions module. There's only a couple things to look at. So I'm going to go to attendance. And underneath attendance, you're going to log into the module, and you'll be able to see the module. And once you're inside the module, you're going to have your normal desktop items. And once you're inside your desktop items, it's going to say I want to. We'll close I want to. We'll notice that we have unposted batches. And with those unposted batches, we'll be able to see that we need to post those batches. Okay, that looks good. So if we have an unposted batch, just like in contributions, we are going to make sure that we post those batches. So I'm going to close the dashboard here, and I'll go to the B to open up my batches. I have a batch here that's unposted. Posting those batches will guarantee that our reports are going to be accurate come the time that we run reports, which we're going to do here in just a second. So we'll click on the batch and click close. And once the batch, click on the batch and click post. Once the batch is, once we click on post, it's going to say, are you sure you want to post batch 1, date Sunday, December 4th, 2016? Event contemporary worship. So we'll say yes. And once we do that, it'll post our batch, and then our numbers will show up in our attendance record. So we can click close here. And to access our attendance record, we can click on the letter A here at the top. We could also go to records and go to attendance records and do the same thing. And we'd be able to see the offerings, the attendance records that have been posted. So we can click on date and click on sort. Then at this point, we can scroll down the screen and we could see those offerings at the very bottom. See those attendance records at the very bottom. My mind is stuck on contributions. So once we've posted those, we're ready to run reports. And I think there's just 2 reports that we would want to see in the attendance module. The first is going to be the attendance by event report. So to access that, I'm going to go to reports, and I'm going to go to attendance by event and click select. And this report allows you to view all of your attendance records either by event or by attendee. And since this is a year-end report, we would do event. Over here on the right-hand side, we tell the system which attendance types we want. And I'd probably select all 5 attendance types is what I would do. Then I'd make sure that I ran the report for the whole year. Then down at the lower right, it's going to say include. And if I want to see the attendance names, the attendees' names, I'll select that. If not, I'll leave it unchecked. We'll make sure that we say all people here underneath who on the left-hand side, and we'll say no filter so that we include every single individual in this report. Then we'll click preview. And once the report previews, then we'll be able to see the total number of people who worshiped, the total number that communed. It does add those 2 together, so you do want to be cautious and careful about which number you select. You don't want to select total, because the total number of people that worshiped would be this number here. So, and usually you commune and worship at the same time. So we'll close that. And that would be our totals. If we want to see the individuals by event, we can check the box for attendees. We can say include gender and age, and we can say include cell phone and email address information. But then you can preview it. And at that point, we'd be able to see the individuals and the number of times that they attended those events. So I'm going to close this. And the second report that I'd like to show is let me look at my notes here. The second report that I like to show is the attendance comparison report. And let me double click on that. And the attendance comparison report allows you to compare your attendance year over year. So I would say all attendees, then I would say at least 2 years, but you can do as many as 10 years. I think we have 4 years of data within our system, so I'm going to say 5 years. Then you can say weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. Monthly works pretty good. Then I can specify which events I want to see, and I can say across the page or down the page. Now, down the page works pretty good, but I think across the page works a little better because the information is more concise, and I can easily see the event, worship, I can see the year, and I can compare year to year for each month. And this is a really nice report here. So I'm going to close that. And that's the 2 reports that I would show inside the attendance module. Then there's also a cleanup utility as well. So you can go to utilities and go to cleanup, and it's going to suggest that you back up, and I would suggest that you back up. So I'll click OK. Then delete attendance records through 12/7/2006. So once again, there's going to be a 10-year hold on your data, but you can click OK and it would purge that information. The same warning would go with deleting attendance records. We suggest you hold on to that information for reporting purposes. The more data you have, the longer you can go back and look and create analytics. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click cancel to close that window. And that's how you would do the year end in the attendance module. So let's go ahead and let's switch back to our PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to click here and screen 1. There we go. And just slide this over here. Okay, everybody should be able to see the PowerPoint presentation again. And back to Shepherd staff. So let's go through a short review. And perform year end in this order: contributions, attendance, membership. Then you can do scheduler and attendance. They are independent and can be done at any time. So make sure to perform it in that order. You do have the ability to pick and choose. If you only use certain modules, those would be the ones that you want to focus on. Remember these basic steps. Update and enter all data. This includes updating envelopes and pledges as well as posting any batches. Then you also want to run any needed reports. This includes printing your contribution statements, your yearly fund total reports, and historical attendance reports. So review, backup, please back up. Making a new backup before completing each module's year-end task. This will give you a fallback point to go to if something is incorrect after running the year-end. 2, complete a year-end backup for each module. So when you're going between modules, you're going to want to back up along the way. And I'd also complete a backup at the very end and then check your data after you've completed all your tasks. So make another backup when your year-end tasks are complete. So let's do a short quiz. True or false? The database rebuild should be run on every single computer that has Shepherd staff. Okay. And you probably have an answer in your head. So the answer is false. To optimize rebuild database, the optimized rebuild database utility will run its checks on the database for all users and all computers that are connected to the database. If one person runs the database rebuild, the rest of the staff will not need to run the utility. Note, running this utility does not delete any data. Multiple choice. Which utilities should you run to make next year's envelope numbers active? A, renumber next year's envelopes. B, start using next year's envelope numbers. Or C, rebuild/optimize database. Okay. And I have my answer in my head. The answer is B. Remember, the renumber next year's envelope utility helps you assign envelope numbers for next year. You will still need to run the start using next year's envelope utility to move the envelope numbers from envelope next year column to envelope column. This will allow you to use the new envelope numbers when entering offerings in 2017. Note, if you are reassigning envelope numbers for the upcoming year, please double check your envelope numbers prior to entering next year's offerings. Please, please, please. Note, if you are reassigning envelope numbers for the upcoming year, please double check your, I included a separate second slide there. The second point is important. If offerings are entered using the old envelope numbers, the only resolutions are to restore backup or manually correct the offering envelope. So please back up and please check them before you enter in offerings. True or false? All contribution and attendance batches should be posted prior to running your final year-end reports. Okay. The answer is true. Please post all of your contribution and attendance batches prior to generating year-end reports. Not doing so will leave your year-end totals short and inaccurate. So please post all your attendance batches. True or false? And I think this is the last question. Pledges can be entered at any time regardless of today's date or pledge date. And the answer is true. Shepherd staff allows users to enter next year's pledges now, and it allows a pledge to be added once a pledge drive has been started. Please remember to recalculate pledges if offerings were present prior to the creation of the pledge. Okay. I do want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. I truly hope you enjoyed the class. Sorry for running a little long there. Please contact us with any questions. You can shoot us an email at support@cts.cph.org. You can, of course, give us a call at 1-800-346-6120, and you can send us a tweet at Concordia Tech. Okay. Signing off. I hope everybody has a great day.